Alex Rhodes hadn't planned on following that late-night waitress, but her voice echoed through the kitchen door of the little Santa Monica restaurant, strained, pleading, "I'm trying. Please believe me." Those words made Alex pause. How could a young woman, working full-time, always leaving late, remain so mysterious every night? What was she hiding? A debt? A secret? Or something he could never have imagined? He decided to follow her, and what he discovered that evening changed everything. Do you believe a single compassionate heart can restore faith in a soul that's lost all hope? All right, dear viewers, get ready for a story that will leave you breathless. Take a moment to hit like and subscribe, only if you truly connect with what you're about to hear, and drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. It's always amazing to see people joining us from all around the world. Nathan wasn't a man easily shaken by little things. He had learned long ago to control everything: his work, his emotions, even his losses. But that night, when he happened to overhear Carol's voice echoing down the hallway behind the kitchen, a creeping unease slithered into every corner of his mind. Her voice was soft, yet trembling. She spoke of a large sum of money, of someone in desperate need, and pleaded with the person on the other end not to give up. There was no context, no explanation, only the worried cadence of each breath she stifled. Nathan stood frozen behind the door, his hand clenched white-knuckled. Part of him wanted to believe she had a good reason, but another part, one that had been betrayed before, one that had watched supposedly trustworthy people tear off their masks, urged him to find out the truth. Not because he wanted to catch Carol in a lie, but because there was a child sleeping in the next room. His son, whose fragile trust could not be misplaced. That night, Nathan followed Carol. No headlights, no engine noise, just her Mercedes gliding smoothly down the road toward the south side of town. She didn't know he was behind her. She never looked back. The bus she transferred to carried her away from the upscale neighborhood where she worked, away from the pristine walls where everything was controlled and clean. When she disembarked in a rougher part of town, Nathan kept his distance, his heart pounding as if he himself were doing something wrong. But all suspicion fell silent when he saw her destination. A faded blue building, its sign crooked on the brick facade. Hope Haven Community Center. He killed the engine and sat motionless in his car. Through the rain-spattered glass, he watched Carol step inside and receive a quick hug from an older woman. Nothing about that scene hinted at deceit or pretense, only simple warmth. When the door closed, Nathan slipped out and quietly found a vantage point at the window directly across the street. Inside, the room was brightly lit but worn. Scratched wooden floors, a threadbare rug scattered with children, some barefoot, others clutching ragged teddy bears. Laughter filled the air, yet some children's eyes still bore that hollow look of kids used to being left behind. Then he saw Carol, not in a caregiver's uniform, not on official business, but simply a woman in a plain sweater, kneeling among the children as if she belonged there. She pulled from her cloth bag a stack of thin storybooks, a handful of colored pencils, and a paper bag of cookies. Every gesture was natural, practiced, not showy. She made no attempt at heroics. She was simply where her heart led her. Nathan stood in silence. For the first time since he began watching, he stopped thinking and allowed himself to feel. The genuine care as Carol gently wiped a boy's runny nose, the patience as she fastened a loose button on a little girl's coat, chatting softly all the while. The devotion as she crouched to share stories at their level, listening to their gasps and giggles. No cameras, no applause, no witnesses, only him. And it was that quiet that choked him. Every prejudice he'd held about a woman just trying to earn money, a nanny with a hidden past, crashed down. Before him was not someone concealing evil, but someone hiding a beautiful heart, fearful of misunderstanding. He retreated, his chest tight, not from disappointment, but from shame. He had doubted her simply because she didn't fit the mold he expected. He had followed her hoping to find fault, but instead discovered what he thought no longer existed in his world: unconditional kindness. All night he couldn't take his eyes off the illuminated room. Carol persevered. Laughter grew louder around her. Nathan realized she wasn't just healing those children. She was awakening in him something he'd lost: faith in humanity. When Carol rose, stacked the books, and gathered her cloth bag, Nathan slipped back to his car. He didn't want to be seen, not out of shame, but because he knew her journey didn't need him intruding right then. Yet that night, he had seen enough to understand. She was not perfect, but she was real. And that truth, simple, unadorned, had changed everything he thought he knew about her. From that night on, something in Nathan quietly shifted. Images of Carol among the children replayed in his mind. Her small gestures, her gentle patience, her eyes intently noting every detail on a child's face, as if she possessed a rare instinct to hear sorrow without words. He told no one, faced no confrontation, yet every action he took afterward sprang from that deep stir of feeling. Without a signature, without a trace, he sent a box of pastries to the center, the very kind Carol once offered Mason after school. A week later, he delivered a few wooden toys, neatly arranged in an old crate he found in his garage. When the gifts were distributed, the children's eyes lit up, and Carol bowed her head longer than usual before smiling. She needed no acknowledgement. She understood. And in that silence, Nathan felt a lightness. He began to learn more: invoices, operating costs, even the list of children in need of medical support. One little girl named Harper caught his attention. A thin file marked "Injury after accident. Needs weekly therapy. No sponsor yet." It didn't take long for Nathan to arrange, through an anonymous foundation, a 6-month sponsorship covering all her expenses. Still unsigned. Still no note. Carol knew. No one else could have done it so quietly. But she said nothing. She simply continued her work, arriving each afternoon, hugging each child, carefully packing away colored pencils after class. Yet something in her had softened. Not because she was helped, but because she was understood. One morning, Carol arrived at the center earlier than usual to find Nathan in the kitchen. He had no clear reason to speak, but when she stood there, her hand lightly resting on the counter, her eyes momentarily hesitant, he sensed the moment needed breaking. She did not smile as she normally would. She did not greet him with her usual hello. The silence was so profound, they might have heard each other's thoughts. She did not reproach him, nor did she demand recognition. Yet that very quiet compelled Nathan to speak, if only to say one simple sentence: "I'm sorry. For doubting you. For letting fear destroy my trust before any reason existed." Carol looked at him longer than usual. Not with anger, not with contempt, but with something in her eyes that he could not escape. And then, very softly, almost in a whisper, she spoke the words she'd held on to all those days: that not everyone sees good intentions, that she feared, if others knew she spent her off hours here, they'd think she lacked devotion. that kindness at times is misunderstood as distraction. Her words, slow but decisive, cut into him deeply. Nathan felt his throat tighten, a sensation he knew too well, from reading his ex-wife's diagnosis, or hearing Mason ask why his mother never came home. It didn't hurt sharply, but it smoldered, and it lingered. All he could say was that he had been wrong, that everything she did was why Mason grew stronger, and why this house once again echoed with laughter. Nothing in her care for those children was unprofessional. Rather, because she had that heart, she could touch others' wounds without asking how deep their pain ran. Carol nodded gently, not forgiveness, not full acceptance, but an acknowledgement that her apology was heard. Nathan understood that some mistakes cannot be erased by deeds alone. They can only be mended with time and patience. From then on, they needed few words. Whenever she left the house for Hope Haven, he no longer asked where she was going. He simply left some leftovers from the kitchen, a few small items in a paper bag placed by the door. She offered no verbal thanks, but each time she returned, her eyes had changed. Softer, more at peace. Their bond was no longer built on doubt or vigilance, but on a shared, silent focus. Nathan no longer needed to stand at the window to watch. He knew that there, among children who had never stood a chance, Carol continued the work he could not buy with money, keeping hope alive, with nothing but her bare hands. Nathan had never imagined that a well-intentioned offer could wound someone. He had weighed his decision carefully. A stable position, a higher salary, more flexible hours so Carol could continue her duties at the mansion while pursuing her volunteer passion. He believed he was doing the right thing, a quiet way to recognize her dedication, a deserving reward for her rare kindness. But Carol's reaction was nothing he'd anticipated. She stood silently. Her hands brushed the tabletop, her gaze averted as if his words had touched a place she had never let anyone enter. She showed no anger. She voiced no reproach, only a long, lingering silence that widened the space between them by millimeters he could feel. And when she finally spoke, her words were neither loud nor sharp, but heavy enough to shatter something delicate and precious inside him. She said that if she accepted his help, she wasn't sure she could still trust in her own true worth. Those words echoed in Nathan's mind, repeating like a confession no one wished to utter. He said nothing, not because he had no reply, but because he dared not make things worse with any justification. After that day, Carol gradually withdrew. Not abruptly, but enough that Nathan felt her absence in the smallest of details. She still arrived on time. She still prepared Noah's breakfast. She still tidied according to schedule, but everything felt colder. She no longer smiled when they passed in the hallway. She no longer refilled his coffee when she passed through the kitchen. She even spoke to Noah only as long as necessary. He didn't blame her. He knew he had crossed a line he never should have. And from that moment on, a strange silence settled between them. No tension, no awkwardness, but unmistakably present, as if both were waiting for something to end, yet neither dared name it. Nathan began waking earlier, sometimes not for work, but just to see if Carol would read to Noah. Yet each morning remained empty. The storybooks lay untouched in the corner where Noah once waited, her steady voice soothing away lingering nightmares. Now the boy would only ask, "Where's Miss Carol?" Then close the book himself, retreating into silence. One morning, Nathan passed the living room and found Noah sitting alone with a storybook open on his lap. The boy did not read. He just stared at the illustrations that once made him laugh. Nathan watched for a long moment, his heart tightening. Not for the child's solitude, but for the look in his eyes, a look devoid of expectation. As evening fell, the house felt emptier than Nathan had known since his wife's death. No soft voices, no gentle laughter echoing from the kitchen. Carol no longer lingered a single minute after her work was done. She left promptly, her steps swift and silent. And Nathan, though he never called her back, watched her go each time. He simply watched. Through the glass door, he saw her familiar figure fade into the distance, once intimate, now estranged. Each step she took away widened the emptiness in the mansion that had once felt too large for just 3 people. Now it truly was too vast, for 2, and for a silence left unspoken. Carol didn't change completely. She merely stepped back, gently, deliberately. And that hurt Nathan more than any argument ever could. Because when someone still cares, they argue. But when they go silent, it means they are closing the door. He didn't know what else to do but respect that distance, even though his heart was crowded with unspoken words, that he never thought she was any less worthy for needing help, that his offer wasn't pity, but admiration, that he only wanted to give her space to be herself without sacrificing so much. But now, those words came too late. And as he sat alone in his study, Nathan sometimes wondered, can kindness, when offered the wrong way, also wound? And are their souls so strong that they'd rather walk alone than let anyone see their weakness? There was never a clear answer. But every time Noah asked, "Who will read me a story tonight?" Nathan's heart tightened just a bit more, not because he couldn't, but because there are some roles, no matter how hard you try, no one else can fill. Dear viewers, take a moment to relax or grab a glass of water before we continue. There's more to come, and surprises lie ahead. And please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always a joy to see friends from all over the world joining us. Comment 1 if you enjoyed this story, so we can keep bringing you more tales that move the heart. Carol walked into Nathan's study with her familiar calm, but her eyes held something long prepared. Clutching a thin file of papers to her chest, her fingers tightened as if to hold fast to the resolve she knew would change everything. Nathan looked up, met that gaze, and in that brief moment he understood. She was about to say what they had both felt for some time. Without lengthy preamble or hesitation, Carol spoke her decision in a voice as clear and light as a breath. She would be leaving. It was time for her to pursue a different journey. Hope Haven was expanding, and she had just been accepted into a part-time social work program at the university. The choice had been weighed carefully. She didn't want to leave Noah in upheaval, nor depart in haste. 2 weeks of transition, training her replacement, everything was arranged neatly, just as she had always lived, quietly but responsibly. Nathan said nothing for several seconds. He simply nodded, once, gently, but behind that gesture lay the weight of 100 unspoken thoughts. He did not blame her. Rather, a sense of loss slipped into his chest, a void he had not realized was so large. There she stood, still Carol, the woman who had quietly crossed the mansion's hallway each morning, read bedtime stories to his son, and soothed the emptiness of his life for so many years. And now, between them, was this announcement, a light farewell, without tears or melodrama, and perhaps for that very reason, all the harder to accept. Carol left the room, leaving behind her faint scent and a tangible sense of emptiness. Nathan sat long after the door closed, his gaze fixed on the file she'd forgotten atop the chaise lounge. In his mind, one question kept repeating. How do you see off someone you're not ready to let go? That night, after Mason was fast asleep, Nathan sat alone at his desk. Before him lay a piece of cream-colored stationery and the pen he reserved for truly important words. No company logo, no familiar heading, just a blank space, awaiting the truths he could not speak aloud. He began to write. Not too much, not flowery, yet every line carried rare sincerity. He wrote of a woman named Carol Larson, more than a nanny, a guardian, a beacon of hope for children who must believe in the world again. He wrote of her quiet but steadfast impact on a boy who had lost his mother, and on a man who had long locked away his heart. He wrote as if speaking to himself, that a person like her deserved opportunity, not out of pity, but because of her dignity and the faith she planted in others. He folded the letter carefully, enclosing it with an application for a scholarship from a prestigious foundation. No signature, no request for reply. He sent it the next morning, as though it were just another task on his list. A week later, at Hope Haven, Carol opened the staff mail slot and found a thicker envelope than usual. She didn't expect anything, yet when she pulled out the letter and read the first lines, her heart pounded. It was the official notice. She had been awarded a full scholarship, highly competitive, reserved only for those who not only met academic requirements, but also demonstrated genuine humanitarian values in community work. The letter didn't name the recommender, but when she turned it over and saw the neat, familiar handwriting, tilted just so, she knew. There was no congratulations, no sender's name. But one thing she felt deeply. He had let her go without turning his back. He chose to stand behind her, not to block her path, but to support her if she stumbled. That simple truth made her feel truly seen. No need to pretend. No need to be okay. Carol pressed the letter to her chest, closing her eyes for a few brief seconds. Not to hide tears, but to hold fast the gratitude swelling inside. She had never imagined that someone like Nathan, reserved, controlled, always precise, could understand the way she existed. Yet he had done so, not with words, but through action. Quiet, profound action that never diminished her. She smiled softly, enough to feel her heart breathing steadily. He did not stop her, and because of that she felt free, strong, worthy, not just to dream, but truly to walk the path she had chosen. They met again not by design nor by chance. It was as if the distance between them had reached its limit, too great to stretch any further, yet too narrow to remain. Both knew it was time to speak the words they'd held back for far too long, the words they feared would never find daylight. Nathan arrived first, standing quietly at the edge of the playground, watching from afar. He saw Carol seated on a bench, her familiar canvas bag by her side. A child raced past her, then glanced back with a grin, and she gently patted the child's head, as if by habit. She had no idea he was there, yet she was not entirely surprised when he stepped forward. They sat side by side. The space between them remained, but its edges were no longer sharp. The air around them seemed to hold its breath, listening to their hearts. Carol did not ask why he had come, and Nathan offered no preamble. After a moment of silence, he spoke, slowly, carefully. He told her that he had been afraid, not of her, but that he might hurt her if he came too close. He was afraid that he would turn her kindness into obligation, that she would think he'd arrived to rescue her rather than stand beside her with genuine respect. And because of that fear, He had stepped back. He had been silent, unable to summon the courage to speak the truth. Carol did not look away, but her eyes began to glisten. Those tears were not weakness, but testament to how deeply his confession had touched a place she'd long believed no one could reach. She had lived under the weight of judgment, of being defined by lack, by pitiful glances, by well-meaning words laced with condescension. So she built walls, no, not high walls, but enough to keep intruders at bay. Then, in a voice as gentle as a whisper, she admitted that he, the man she once thought unreachable, had been the one to make her believe that kindness could exist without condition or hidden motive, and that, to her, was more precious than anything. Nathan did not reply immediately. He simply looked at her for a long moment, as if memorizing every detail of her face, the strength that had learned to withstand pain, yet still knew how to feel. Then, very softly, he said, "I love you." Not from the beginning, not because she'd been kind to his son, but because she was herself, with her limits, her scars, and a compassion he had never encountered in anyone else. Carol remained silent. Tears streamed down her cheeks, yet her lips curved in a gentle smile. There was no hurried response. Only in her eyes was everything made clear. Relief flooded her chest, as if a burden had been lifted. No more doubts, no more defenses, only the truth. Nathan reached into his breast pocket and withdrew a soft-covered notebook, worn at the edges. He handed it to her, saying, "It belongs to Mason." But Carol sensed something more. She opened it, turning its pages. Inside were neat lines of writing, each page addressed to Noah. Words of encouragement, of comfort, sentences like beacons for a child learning to find strength after loss. You are not alone. You are the good left in the world. No storm lasts forever. Carol turned to the final page and found the words that caught her breath. You are my inspiration. Her hand trembled as she laid the notebook in her lap, pressing both hands over it to hold its warmth. This was no mere declaration of love. It was the deepest, most sincere admission, unadorned, yet unmistakable. A man who had long sealed away his inner world, now inscribing his truth in his own handwriting. Carol uttered no words. She simply looked at him. In her clear, grateful, and moved gaze lay more than any spoken phrase could convey. And in that moment, between them there was no distance, no fractured past, no lingering doubt, only one undeniable truth. They had found each other, and this time, they would not let go. The gala hall at Hope Haven gleamed under crystal chandeliers. The sound was just loud enough to feel grand without feeling distant. On stage, a large sign read, "Plant hope, sow faith," perfectly foreshadowing what was about to unfold. Carol stood among the crowd, quietly observing, unaware that in mere minutes, every notion she held about love, family, and recognition would change forever. Nathan stepped onto the stage, his tailored suit immaculate yet unable to conceal the tension in his eyes. He took the microphone, offering a brief, simple introduction, but then each word grew weightier, more real, and no longer about the event. He wasn't speaking to the audience, he was speaking to her, and to himself. He spoke of a woman who entered his life not with fanfare, but with steadfast presence. He described how she healed a child learning to let go of pain and soothed a man who believed he had locked away his own heart. He shared that, out of all the goodness to touch his life since his wife's passing, Carol was the greatest surprise of all. The room seemed to hold its breath as Nathan paused. He knelt on one knee, revealing a velvet box. Inside lay a simple ring, engraved with 3 names: Carol, Nathan, Noah. No long speech, no showmanship. Just one question, earnest and heartfelt. Carol stood motionless, her hand covering her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. In that brief moment, all the fears, hesitations, and yearning to belong converged in her gaze. Then she nodded, no words needed, yet the hall erupted in applause. It was the nod of a woman who once doubted her worthiness of love, a woman who silently walked home in the dark, wondering if kindness still had a place in this world. Now she stood bathed in light and the admiring eyes of hundreds, not pitying her, but honoring her. Noah bounded onto the stage, wrapping his small arms around her from behind, his voice clear. Mom. The single word, so simple, carried enough weight to stir every heart in the room. Carol knelt to embrace him. His tiny arms clung to her as if no distance could ever separate them again. Nathan stepped forward, enfolding them both. Family now was no longer a concept bound by blood, but the place where hearts find home. The air in the hall brimmed with emotion, but not from drama, from simplicity, from a story neither loud nor flashy, yet touching the deepest human instinct. To be loved, to be believed in, to belong. In that moment it was clear, not a marriage proposal but a declaration. That kindness, when given rightly, to the right person, can form the foundation of something stronger and more beautiful than love itself. It can heal. Their story didn't begin with perfection, but with pain. It didn't flourish on promises, but on understanding. And that is what makes it a journey anyone who's ever felt lost can see themselves in. Because sometimes what we need most isn't someone to fix us, but someone to see us, even when we doubt our own worth. And if you, reading this, have ever felt alone, doubted another's kindness, or thought yourself unworthy of being chosen, remember, you needn't be perfect to be loved. You need only be real and brave enough to open your heart once more. Thank you for staying with this story to the end. If it moved you, help us spread its message. Don't hesitate to subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, or pass this video on to loved ones in the US or wherever you call home. We'd love to know, where are you watching from and what time is it there? We read every comment and cherish each feeling you share. Because here, we believe that, even in the quietest moments, kindness can echo, and love, if true, will always find its way back to the heart.